I still remember the exact shade of blue in that conference room. Ocean blue, my mother had called it when she redecorated the office last year. It inspires trust and loyalty, she'd explained to the interior designer while I silently calculated how the unnecessary renovation would impact our quarterly budget. But on that rainy Tuesday afternoon, as I watched my life's work being handed to my younger brother on a silver platter, that blue felt like I was drowning in it. 10 years of sacrifice, innovation, and relentless work, gone in a single sentence. Parker will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My brother, who had spent more time on his yacht than in our offices, would now be my boss. The boardroom erupted in congratulations while I sat frozen, the quarterly report I'd prepared, showing our strongest performance to date, still clutched in my hands. The numbers swam before my eyes. $10.2 million in revenue, 27% growth year over year, all under my leadership. And yet, somehow, I was just not ready. That was the day I stopped playing by their rules and started creating my own. This is the story of how I lost everything, and then built something so much greater that they came crawling back, only to find the door firmly shut. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My voice sounded distant even to my own ears, like it belonged to someone else entirely. The sleek conference table of Meridian Wellness stretched out before me, suddenly feeling miles long as 12 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably in my direction. My mother, Vivian Reed, CEO and founder of the wellness supplement company I'd helped build from her kitchen table to an 8-figure business, didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. Instead, she straightened the papers in front of her, manicured fingernails tapping rhythmically against the polished surface. As I was saying, she continued with practiced smoothness, after careful consideration, the board and I have decided that Parker will be stepping into the role of Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Audrey, you'll continue as Chief Operating Officer, reporting directly to Parker. My brother, sprawled in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no, flashed me what I supposed he thought was a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Aud. Nothing's really going to change, except everything already had. Looked down at the quarterly report in my hands, the one I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. finalizing. The one that showed how my direct-to-consumer strategy had increased our margins by 12%. The one that detailed the new manufacturing partnership I'd secured that would cut production costs by nearly a third. I've been running this company for the past 5 years, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. We've gone from $2 million to over $10 million in annual revenue under my leadership. And now you're saying I'm not qualified to be CEO? My mother finally looked at me, her perfectly lined eyes narrowing slightly. Audrey, no one is questioning your contributions. You've done wonderful work on the operational side. But as we expand, globally, we need someone with Parker's vision, his charisma. His charisma, I repeated flatly. You mean his ability to charm investors over golf while I'm actually running the company? Parker leaned forward, his expression shifting to one of exaggerated patience. Come on, sis, you know you've always been better with the details. I'm the big picture guy. Mom's just playing to our strengths. The board members nodded in agreement. Of course they did. Half of them were my mother's friends from her country club, people who'd invested in Meridian Wellness as a favor to her years ago. The other half were executives she'd poached from larger corporations, men who'd been skeptical of taking direction from me since day one. If I may, Mrs. Reed, interjected Jonathan Chen, our chief financial officer, and the only person in the room besides me who actually understood our financial statements. Audrey has been instrumental in our growth. Perhaps we should discuss a transition plan rather than an immediate change. My mother waved her hand dismissively. We've already discussed this at length, Jonathan. The decision is final. She turned, to Parker. "Now, shall we review the expansion strategy?" And just like that, I was sidelined in my own company. The company I had built while Parker was busy getting his third degree, his MBA from Harvard, which apparently qualified him to run a business he'd barely set foot in for the past 5 years. I sat in stunned silence as my mother walked through Parker's vision for Meridian's future. New product lines I'd never approved. International markets I'd specifically advised against entering until we had stronger domestic distribution. Partnerships with celebrities who charged exorbitant fees but delivered minimal ROI. Every slide of the presentation was another nail in the coffin of the company I'd built, the company I loved. And everyone around the table, including my mother and brother, seemed oblivious to the fact that they were dismantling years of strategic growth for the sake of flashy, expensive initiatives that would look good in press releases but terrible on our balance sheet. When the meeting finally ended, 90 excruciating minutes later, I remained seated as everyone filed out. My mother paused at the door, looking back at me with an expression that might have been concern if it wasn't so clearly impatience. "Audrey, don't sulk. It's not becoming. We have the influencer dinner at 7, and I expect you to be there to support your brother." Without waiting for my response, she left, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Only Parker remained leaning against the conference table with his arms crossed. "Look, I know you're upset," he said, his tone conciliatory. "But this is a good thing, really. You've been working yourself to death for years. Now you can focus on what you're good at without the pressure of being the face of the company." I looked up at him, really looked at him. My younger brother. Handsome, charming, and utterly convinced of his own importance despite having accomplished virtually nothing on his own merit. It wasn't entirely his fault, I supposed. Our mother had been grooming him for greatness since he was in diapers, while I was always expected to be the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who would keep things running smoothly in the background. "What exactly am I good at, Parker?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he saw me. He shrugged. "You know, the operational stuff, logistics, supply chain, all those spreadsheets you love so much. You mean the fundamentals of the business, the things that actually make us profitable." His smile faltered slightly. "Don't be like that. We both bring different things to the table. Mom's just recognizing that my skill set is better suited to leadership." I stood up slowly, gathering my papers. "Let me ask you something. When was the last time you reviewed a P&L statement? Do you know our margins on the new collagen line? Have you ever even met our manufacturing partners in person?" Parker rolled his eyes. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't need to know every tiny detail to see the bigger picture. That's why I'll have you. Have me, like I was an asset, to be acquired along with his new corner office." "Congratulations on your promotion," I said finally, walking past him toward the door. "I'm sure you'll do just fine." "So you'll be at the dinner tonight?" he called after me. I didn't answer. I went straight to my office, closed the door, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears of disappointment, but deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. Everything I'd worked for. Everything. I'd sacrificed. Weekends, relationships, even starting a family. All of it had been for Meridian. And in the span of a single meeting, I'd been demoted to glorified assistant for my baby brother. When the tears finally subsided, I sat at my desk and stared out the window at the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle stood in the distance, a reminder of ambition realized, of dreams built into reality through persistence and vision. I'd always admired that about my city, its ability to reinvent itself, to grow beyond its origins into something unexpected and remarkable. Maybe it was time I did the same. I opened my laptop and began to type. Not notes for a meeting or projections for next quarter, but a resignation letter. Simple, professional, effective immediately. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I outlined a transition plan for my responsibilities. I wouldn't leave the company in chaos, regardless of how they'd treated me, and attached detailed documentation for all ongoing projects. Just as I finished, there was a knock at my door. Before I could answer, my mother swept in, as imperious as ever in her designer suit. "There you are. Why haven't you been answering your phone? The PR team needs to brief you before tonight's event." She paused, finally registering my red-rimmed eyes and the tissue box on my desk. Her expression softened marginally. "Oh, Audrey, I know this is difficult, but it's for the best. You've always been so serious, so technical. Parker has the personality this company needs to go to the next level." I took a deep breath. "Is that why you never offered me the CEO position, even after I took us from $2 million to $10 million? Because I'm too serious?" My mother sighed, perching on the edge of my desk. "Sweetheart, business isn't just about numbers. It's about relationships, about making people believe in your vision. Parker lights up a room. Investors respond to him. You've always been more behind the scenes." "Behind the scenes," I repeated. "You mean doing the actual work?" She frowned. "That's not fair. Parker works in his own way. His networking has opened doors that I walked through." I interrupted. "I negotiated every major deal we've ever made. I developed our product roadmap. I built our e-commerce platform from scratch when we couldn't afford to hire developers. And we appreciate that. No one is saying you haven't contributed, but leadership requires a certain quality. A Y chromosome, apparently." My mother's eyes hardened. "Now you're just being childish. This has nothing to do with Parker being a man, doesn't it?" I gestured to the company photo on my wall, showing our executive team. 8 men and 2 women, including me. "How many female executives have you hired, Mom? How many women sit on our board?" "This isn't about gender politics, Audrey. It's about who's right for the job. And frankly, your reaction right now is exactly why the board agreed with me. You're too emotional, too caught up in details and perceived slights to see the bigger picture." The irony of her calling me emotional while simultaneously dismissing my concrete achievements in favor of Parker's charisma was apparently lost on her. I handed her the printed resignation letter. "Here's my 2 weeks' notice." She stared at the paper in her hand, uncomprehending at first, then with growing alarm. "What is this? Some kind of tantrum?" "No, Mom. It's a business decision. You've made it clear that there's no future for me at Meridian beyond being Parker's support staff. I'm choosing to invest my time and energy elsewhere." "This is ridiculous," she sputtered, her carefully composed facade cracking. "You can't just leave. The Evolve line launch is in 3 weeks. The distributor negotiations are ongoing. Parker needs." "Parker is the CEO now," I said, standing up. "I'm sure he can handle it. After all, he has the vision and charisma the company needs. Where will you even go? What will you do?" she demanded, following me as I began packing my personal items into a box I'd retrieved from the supply closet. I continued methodically emptying my desk. The framed photo of our first office, the jade plant I'd kept alive for 7 years, the trophy we'd won for Most Innovative Health Supplement 3 years ago at the industry's biggest trade show. "I don't know yet," I admitted, wrapping the II trophy in tissue paper. "But I'm sure I'll figure it out. I built this company from nothing. I can build something else." "You're making a terrible mistake," my mother said, her voice shifting from anger to a strange sort of pleading. "Parker needs you. The company needs you." I paused, looking at her directly. "Then maybe you should have valued me when you had the chance." I finished packing my things in silence while my mother watched, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a calculating assessment I knew too well. She was already thinking about the press release, the story they'd spin about my departure. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "A better title? More equity? We can negotiate." "It's not about titles or money, Mom. It's about respect. About recognizing what I've built and what I'm capable of. You've made it very clear today that you don't think I'm leadership material, that no matter what I achieve, Parker will always be the golden child. And you know what? That's fine. But I don't have to stick around and watch him dismantle everything I've worked for." I picked up my box and walked toward the door. My mother remained where she was, stunned into silence perhaps for the first time in her life. "Goodbye, Mom. Good luck with the influencer dinner." As I walked through the open office, past rows of desks where employees quickly pretended not to be watching this dramatic exit, a strange sense of lightness began to replace the crushing weight of betrayal. For 10 years, every decision I'd made had been for Meridian Wellness. Every waking hour devoted to its growth, its success, its future. Now, suddenly, I had no plan, no structure, no clear path forward. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was necessary. I stopped at the desk of my assistant, Zoe, who was looking at me with wide, concerned eyes. "Audrey, what's happening? Why are you carrying a box?" I set it down and gave her a genuine smile. "Change of plans, Zoe. I'm leaving Meridian." Her mouth dropped open. "What? Why? Is this because of the CEO announcement? Because everyone thinks it should have been you, you know. People are already talking." That was surprisingly nice to hear, even if it didn't change anything. "I appreciate that. But yes, it's time for me to move on. Can you do me a favor and forward any important emails to my personal account for the next 2 weeks? I've left transition documents on the shared drive." Zoe nodded, still looking shell-shocked. "Of course. But what are you going to do now?" I picked up my box again, feeling a strange mix of terror and excitement bubbling up inside me. "I have absolutely no idea," I told her honestly. "But for the first time in a decade, I get to decide for myself." As I pushed through the glass doors of Meridian Wellness for what I thought would be the last time, the Seattle rain hit my face like a wake-up call. Cold, shocking, and oddly refreshing. I had no umbrella, no plan, and no job. But I had something more valuable: the knowledge that I could build something from nothing. I'd done it once already, making millions for a company that didn't value me. Now it was time to see what I could build for myself. I hailed a cab, placed my box of belongings on the seat beside me, and made a decision. I wouldn't be attending any influencer dinner tonight. Instead, I'd be opening a bottle of wine, ordering takeout, and starting to plan the next chapter of my life, one where I would never again let anyone tell me I wasn't ready. What I didn't know then was that 3 years later, they'd be the ones who weren't ready. Not for what I was about to build, and certainly not for the day they'd come knocking on my door, desperate for my help. Freedom felt strange after a decade of 80-hour work weeks. The first morning I woke up without an agenda, without fires to put out or meetings to prepare for. I actually checked my phone 5 times, convinced I'd somehow slept through multiple alarms. But there were no urgent emails, no text messages from my mother demanding I review a contract, no updates from our manufacturing partners that needed immediate attention. Just silence, and the gentle patter of Seattle rain against my bedroom window. I made coffee. Real coffee. Not the rushed, barely tasted cup I usually gulp down while reviewing production numbers. I sat on my balcony despite the drizzle, wrapped in a thick sweater, and watched the ferries crossing Elliott Bay. When was the last time I'd actually looked at the view from my own apartment? I couldn't remember. The initial adrenaline of walking out had faded, leaving behind a hollow uncertainty. I'd spent my entire adult life at Meridian Wellness. My identity was so intertwined with the company that without it, I wasn't entirely sure who Audrey Reed was anymore. By day 3 of my unexpected sabbatical, anxiety had set in. I'd ignored 17 calls from my mother, 12 from Parker, and a surprisingly sincere voicemail from Jonathan Chen, expressing regret over my departure. My bank account was healthy enough. I'd always lived well below my means, saving aggressively, but the absence of structure was maddening. I did what I always did when feeling untethered. I made spreadsheets, financial projections calculating how long my savings would last, lists of potential career paths, scored by criteria like market growth, required investment, and alignment with my skills. Flow charts of decision trees, each path leading to different possible futures. None of it helped. The problem wasn't a lack of options. With my experience, dozens of companies would hire me in a heartbeat. The problem was that I couldn't bear the thought of building something else for someone else, only to be sidelined again when it suited them. On day 7, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Zoe holding a large cardboard box and wearing an anxious expression. "I probably shouldn't be here," she said, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be followed. "But I thought you'd want these before they disappeared." Inside, the box were my notebooks, 5 years' worth of product ideas, market analyses, and business strategies I'd developed at Meridian, but never had the chance to implement. Ideas my mother had dismissed as too experimental, or that Parker had deemed not sexy enough for the brand. "Parker's already making changes," Zoe said, stepping into my apartment when I invited her in. "He's signed 3 celebrity endorsement deals at 5 times what we normally pay. He fired Thomas from product development when Thomas questioned the rush timeline for the new beauty line." I winced. Thomas had been with us since the beginning, one of the few people who truly understood our formulation process. "How bad is it?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know. Zoe hesitated. "The atmosphere is tense. Your mother's trying to keep things running while Parker holds a lot of meetings with his business school friends. He's talking about a complete brand overhaul. And the distribution deal with Wellspring? The nationwide retail chain had been on the verge of placing our products in all their stores. A deal I'd been negotiating for months. On hold. Parker thinks we should focus on luxury positioning instead of mass market." She made air quotes around the phrase, her frustration evident. I shook my head, trying not to care. It wasn't my company anymore. Parker and my mother could run it into the ground if they wanted to. After Zoe left, I opened the box and spread my notebooks across my dining table. Flipping through the pages, I was struck by how many ideas I'd set aside due to my mother's conservative approach to growth. Ideas I'd been passionate about but had shelved to maintain harmony. One notebook in particular caught my attention. Dated from about 2 years ago, after I'd attended a conference on sustainable wellness. Inside were detailed notes on a concept I'd been particularly excited about: personalized nutrition supplements based on individual health data, delivered on a subscription basis. I'd done extensive research on the emerging field of nutrigenomics, how different nutrients affected different people based on their genetic makeup, lifestyle, and health goals. I'd even developed algorithms that could translate complicated health markers into simple, personalized supplement regimens. The market potential was enormous, especially as consumers became increasingly aware that generic, one-size-fits-all vitamins weren't optimally effective. When I'd presented the concept to my mother, she'd dismissed it as too complicated for our customer base. Parker had laughed outright, calling it science fiction. But I had believed in it then, and looking at my research now, I still did. I reached for my laptop and began searching for updated market data. The personalized nutrition market had grown even faster than I'd projected 2 years ago. Several startups had entered the space, but most were focused on meal planning or generic supplement recommendations based on simple questionnaires, not the data-driven, scientifically backed approach I'd envisioned. By midnight, I was surrounded. by fresh printouts, my excitement building with each piece of information I gathered. This concept hadn't just been ahead of its time, it was still ahead of the market. With my experience in supplement formulation, supply chain management, and e-commerce, I could build something genuinely innovative, something that was entirely mine. I slept fitfully that night, my mind racing with possibilities and questions. By morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to build this business, not for my mother, not for Meridian, but for myself. The first step was finding a lab partner who could help develop and test formulations. I reached out to Dr. Elisa Kwan, a biochemist I'd met at several industry conferences who had recently started her own research consultancy. Over coffee at a small cafe in Fremont, far from Meridian's offices, I pitched her my vision. "Personalized supplements aren't new, Audrey," she said cautiously after listening to my idea. "Plenty of companies claim to offer custom formulas, but they're not actually personalized," I countered, pushing my notebook toward her. "They ask 10 generic questions and assign people to broad categories. I'm talking about real personalization, based on actual health markers, blood work, genetic factors, lifestyle data, all processed through an algorithm that identifies specific nutritional needs, then creates truly customized formulations." Elisa skimmed my notes, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest. This level of customization would require significant research validation and the logistics of producing individualized supplements at scale. She trailed off, looking up at me. "This is ambitious, even for you." "I know," I admitted. "That's why I need a brilliant biochemist as my scientific advisor." She laughed. "Flattery will get you everywhere." Then, more seriously, "What about non-competes? Meridian could shut this down before you even start." It was a valid concern. I'd reviewed my employment contract thoroughly over the past week. My agreement prohibits me from working with direct competitors for 1 year, but this isn't a direct competitor to Meridian's mass-market supplements. This is medical-grade personalized nutrition, an entirely different category and customer base. Elisa nodded slowly. "Legally defensible. Still, your mother has resources and connections. She could make things difficult." "She could," I agreed. "But I know the industry better than she does, and I know what Meridian doesn't do well, which is innovate." After 2 hours of discussion, Elisa was in. We shook hands across the table, and for the first time since walking out of Meridian, I felt the fog of uncertainty lifting. I had direction again. I had purpose. Over the next month, I threw myself into building what would become Calibrate Wellness. I rented a small office space in Pioneer Square, a historic district well away from Meridian's sleek downtown headquarters. I hired a developer to start building the health assessment platform and algorithm. I reconnected with manufacturing contacts I'd worked with at Meridian, carefully approaching only those who produced specialized products that wouldn't conflict with my former company's supply chain. The first real challenge came when I looked at my financial projections. Even being conservative with expenses, I would need at least $500,000 to develop the platform, run initial clinical validations, and produce the first batch of customized supplements. My savings would cover about half that amount. I needed investors, but not just any investors. I needed people who understood the long-term value of what I was building, who wouldn't push for premature growth or try to dilute my vision. And given the Seattle wellness industry's tight-knit nature, I needed investors who wouldn't immediately report back to my mother. This led me to an unlikely meeting on a rainy Tuesday morning at a coffee shop near the University of Washington. Across from me sat Dennis Okafor, a retired pharmaceutical executive who'd made a fortune developing specialized drug delivery systems before shifting to angel investing in health startups. "So," he said after I finished my pitch, "you want to create truly personalized supplement regimens based on individual biomarkers, delivered through a subscription model with regular testing to adapt formulations as the client's health changes? That's The essence of it, yes, I confirmed, sliding my business plan across the table. The technology exists. The challenge is bringing it all together in a user-friendly, scalable system. Dennis flipped through my projections. And you're the former COO of Meridian Wellness. I am, I said carefully. I know your mother, he commented, not looking up from the papers. Met her at a fundraiser last year. Formidable woman. My heart sank. This had been a mistake. She is, I agreed, already calculating how quickly I could end this meeting. Dennis closed the folder and fixed me with an assessing look. She told everyone who would listen that her son was a business genius, the future of wellness innovation. Didn't mention having a daughter in the business at all. The familiar sting of invisibility burned, but I kept my expression neutral. That sounds like her. I looked into Meridian's growth trajectory after meeting her, he continued. Impressive numbers, especially the last 5 years. That was your work, wasn't it? I blinked, surprised by the direct question. I was COO during that period, yes. And now you've left to build something your mother doesn't believe in, something that could revolutionize how we approach nutritional supplementation. He tapped my business plan. Something with a much higher ceiling than Meridian's mass market products. That's correct. Dennis leaned back, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You know what I like about this plan, Ms. Reed? It's thorough. It's ambitious but grounded in science. And it's clearly the work of someone with something to prove. I'm not doing this to spite my mother, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. No? He raised an eyebrow. That would be a perfectly valid motivator in my opinion. But regardless of your reasons, this is one of the most compelling business models I've seen in the wellness space in years. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook, an actual paper checkbook, something I hadn't seen in ages. I'd like to invest $250,000 as seed funding, with an option for an additional $250,000 at the completion of your clinical validation phase. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. Just like that? Dennis smiled fully now. I've been investing in healthcare innovations for 20 years, Ms. Reed. I know a winning concept when I see one, and I know talent when I see it, even when others might overlook it. With Dennis's investment secured, Calibrate Wellness moved from concept to reality. I leased a small lab space adjacent to our office, hired a small team of biochemists recommended by Elisa, and partnered with a CLIA-certified testing lab that could process our clients' health markers. The next 3 months passed in a blur of development sprints, formulation testing, and regulatory compliance work. I worked harder than I ever had at Meridian, but this time, every hour felt purposeful. This was my vision, my company, my future. No one could sideline me or tell me I wasn't ready to lead. The most unexpected joy came from building a team that shared my values. I hired people based on talent and drive, not connections or pedigrees. My lead developer, Raj, had been rejected by multiple tech companies despite his brilliant coding skills because he'd learned programming through boot camps instead of a 4-year degree. My operations manager, Lucia, had been passed over for promotion at her previous company despite single-handedly optimizing their entire fulfillment process. Each person I brought on board had something to prove, just like me. We worked in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and uneven wooden floors, a far cry from Meridian's sleek corporate offices, but the energy in our space was electric, fueled by genuine belief in what we were building. 6 months after leaving Meridian, I stood in our small lab, holding the first complete Calibrate Wellness test kit in my hands. The sleek packaging contained everything a client would need to submit blood, saliva, and lifestyle data for analysis. Our platform would translate those inputs into a personalized supplement formula, which our lab would then create and ship directly to the client in compostable daily packets. It's really happening, Lucia said beside me, her voice hushed with something like awe. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. After months of 18-hour days, countless challenges and moments of doubt, we had a product. A real product that represented everything I believed in about wellness: personalized, science-based, accessible. "When do we launch?" Raj asked. The entire team gathered around as I held our first completed kit. 3 weeks, I decided. "We'll do a soft launch with the 100 beta testers who've signed up through our wait list. Get their feedback, refine the user experience, then scale up for full public launch in 3 months." The team cheered, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt something I'd never experienced at Meridian: complete alignment between my vision and my work. No compromises to satisfy my mother's conservative approach. No watering down of concepts to make them palatable to investors who didn't understand the science. Just pure, focused innovation. That evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang with a familiar number. My mother. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. We hadn't spoken since I'd walked out of Meridian. Part of me was curious about what she wanted, what she'd heard about my new venture. But a stronger part recognized that this was a pivotal moment, a test of my resolve to build something independent of her influence or approval. I declined the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Whatever she wanted could wait. I had my own company to build now. What I didn't know then was that declining that call would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually bring my mother and brother to my doorstep, not as family, but as desperate competitors watching their empire crumble while mine thrived. But that reckoning was still months away. For now, I had a launch to prepare for, a team to lead, and a future entirely of my own making to step into. As I walked to my car in the gentle Seattle drizzle, I felt lighter than I had in years. The path ahead wasn't certain, and success wasn't guaranteed. But for the first time since I'd joined Meridian Wellness fresh out of college, every step I took was in a direction I had chosen for myself. That alone made the risk worthwhile. Launch day arrived with an unexpected technical crisis. 2 hours before our platform was scheduled to go live for our beta testers, Raj burst into my office, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "The processing algorithm crashed during the final load test," he announced, laptop clutched to his chest like a shield. "It can't handle multiple users accessing the assessment simultaneously." I felt my stomach drop, but kept my expression neutral. "How long? To fix it?" "Minimum 3 days to rewrite that section of code. Maybe a week to properly test it." A week's delay would burn through cash we couldn't afford to waste. Our beta testers, health-conscious early adopters who'd signed up through carefully targeted outreach, were expecting access today. Delaying now would damage our credibility before we'd even begun. "What about a staged rollout?" I suggested. "Release access in batches of 20 users every few hours." Raj considered this, fingers all ready, tapping calculations on his keyboard. "That might work. We'd need to email everyone, adjust expectations." "I'll handle communications," I said, already drafting the message in my head. "You focus on making the batched access work." He nodded and rushed out. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This was the reality of building something new, constant, problem-solving, continuous adaptation. At Meridian, a launch delay would have triggered panic, blame casting, and my mother's inevitable disappointed sighs. Here, it was simply another challenge to overcome. By evening, we'd successfully onboarded our first 40 beta users. Their health assessment data was flowing into our system, generating their personalized supplement profiles. The remaining 60 would join over the next 36 hours, giving our servers breathing room to process each batch. "Crisis averted," Lucia said, handing me a cup of coffee as we watched the data dashboard update in real time. "Though I think Raj might need a vacation after this." I smiled, taking a grateful sip. "We all might, but first, we need to make sure these formulations are perfect." The next 2 weeks were consumed by fine-tuning our algorithms based on beta user feedback. Some reported the assessment taking too long. Others wanted more detailed explanations of how their health markers influenced their formulations. Each piece of feedback became a priority task, each improvement bringing us closer to the product I'd envisioned. Our office became a second home to the entire team. We ordered in dinner most nights, working until midnight or later. I kept a change of clothes at my desk, and sometimes slept on the office couch rather than waste time commuting to my apartment. It wasn't sustainable, but it was necessary. We were racing against our limited runway, determined to prove our concept before the seed money ran low. The financial reality was sobering. Even with Dennis's investment, we were burning through cash at an alarming rate. Lab equipment, testing partnerships, inventory, regulatory compliance, software development. The costs added up quickly, while revenue remained theoretical until we moved beyond the beta phase. Each morning, I updated our financial projections, watching our runway shrink. 6 months of operating capital remained, then 5, then 4. We needed to launch publicly soon or secure additional funding. Preferably, both. On a particularly tense Tuesday, as I was reviewing our dwindling accounts, Dennis stopped by unannounced. He took one look at the spreadsheet on my screen and chuckled. Cash flow anxiety, the startup founder's constant companion. I closed the laptop with a sigh. That obvious? You have the same expression I had when my first company was 3 months from bankruptcy. He settled into the chair across from my desk. So, how bad is it? We have about 4 months at current burn rate, I admitted. The beta is going well. Feedback is positive. The formulations are performing as expected. But scaling up for public launch requires more capital than we have. Dennis nodded, unsurprised. I've been following your progress. Your team is building something impressive, but scientific innovation is expensive. He paused, studying me. Have you considered approaching venture capital? I shifted uncomfortably. I've been in discussions with a few firms. But they all want faster growth, broader market appeal. One suggested diluting the science to make the product more accessible to average consumers. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. That's exactly what I left Meridian to avoid, compromising quality for quick profits. Dennis leaned forward. What if you didn't have to compromise? Every investor wants a return, I pointed out, and most want it sooner rather than later. Not every investor. He reached into his jacket, producing a folded document. I'm prepared to invest the additional $250,000 we discussed initially, plus introduce you to my investment syndicate. Between us, we could secure you another $1 million, enough for a proper launch and 6 more months of runway. I stared at him, stunned. Why would you double down when we haven't even proven market viability? Because I invested in you, Audrey, not just your business model. His expression turned serious. I've watched how you've built this team. How you've adapted to challenges without sacrificing your vision. That's rare. The implied comparison to my mother's leadership style hung unspoken between us. I thought of how she would have handled our launch delay, the blame, the recrimination, the reminder that Parker would have found a more elegant solution. Thank you, I said, meaning it deeply. But I need your honesty. Am I being stubborn? About maintaining full scientific integrity? Should I be considering a more commercial approach? Dennis chuckled. You're asking if you should be more like Meridian? More like your mother? Put that way, the answer was obvious. No. Then trust. Your instincts. Calibrate can revolutionize personalized nutrition precisely because you won't cut corners. The market for genuine innovation is smaller initially, but more sustainable long-term. He slid the document across my desk. My offer. Review it with your lawyer, but know it comes with no strings regarding your vision. With Dennis's additional investment and introductions to his syndicate, Calibrate secured enough funding for a proper public launch. We hired 3 more biochemists, expanded our lab space, and refined our platform based on beta feedback. 4 months after our soft launch, we were ready to introduce Calibrate Wellness to the world. The night before our public launch, I finally returned to my apartment to get a full night's sleep in my actual bed. As I was changing out of my work clothes, my phone pinged with a news alert. Meridian Wellness announces major expansion into luxury beauty market. I shouldn't have clicked it, but curiosity won out. The article featured a glossy photo of Parker in Meridian's conference room. Same room where I'd been told I wasn't CEO material, surrounded by elegant product packaging. He was quoted extensively about Meridian's bold new direction and premium positioning, with vague references to proprietary formulations that would revolutionize beauty from within. What struck me most wasn't the grandiosity of his claims, but the absence of specifics. No mention of clinical testing, no reference to the science behind these new products. Just empty marketing promises wrapped in luxury branding. More concerning were the analyst quotes buried toward the end of the piece. Aggressive expansion, significant capital investment, and risky pivot suggested Meridian was betting everything on this new direction. One analyst noted the company had taken on substantial debt to finance the launch, a strategy my mother had always avoided during my tenure. I set down my phone, torn between vindication and an unexpected pang of worry. I'd built Meridian's financial models, developed its growth strategy. I knew the company's strengths and limitations intimately. This kind of rapid expansion into an unfamiliar market segment with debt financing was precarious at best, reckless at worst, but it wasn't my problem anymore. Tomorrow, Calibrate would launch. My focus needed to be there, not on the company that had cast me aside. Launch day dawned bright and clear, a rarity in Seattle's typically overcast spring. I arrived at the office early to find the team already there, energy crackling in the air as they made final preparations. The waiting list is at 3,642 and growing, Lucia reported, practically bouncing with excitement. PR outreach has secured mentions in 3 health publications, and that podcast interview you did last week is driving significant traffic to the landing page. Raj gave a thumbs up from his workstation. Servers are ready, load tested to handle. 5 times our expected first-day volume. We're good to go. At exactly 9 a.m., we flipped the switch. Calibrate Wellness was officially open for business. The first order came through 3 minutes later, a woman in Portland who'd been on our waiting list since the beginning. We cheered as her assessment data flowed into our system, launching the algorithm that would create her personalized supplement formulation. By noon, we had 78 orders. By closing time, 215. Not explosive growth by tech startup standards, but solid validation for our concept. Each order represented someone willing to invest in truly personalized nutrition, someone who understood the value of what we'd built. The next morning, I was reviewing our first-day metrics when my desk phone rang. The office landline, not my cell. Few people had that number. Audrey Reed, I answered, distracted by the charts on my screen. Ms. Reed, this is Vanessa Chen from Biotech Quarterly. The name of the leading industry publication immediately captured my attention. I'm working on a feature about innovations in personalized nutrition and would love to interview you about Calibrate Wellness. I sat up straighter. I'd be happy to discuss our approach. What's your angle for the piece? We're examining how personalized nutrition is evolving beyond basic questionnaires to more data-driven models. Your background at Meridian combined with Calibrate's novel approach makes for a compelling narrative. My grip tightened on the receiver. The story should focus on Calibrate's technology and mission, not my history with Meridian. Of course, she agreed smoothly. Though readers might be interested in how your experience at a traditional supplement company informed your vision for something more personalized. It was a reasonable point. My years at Meridian had shown me precisely what wasn't working in the industry, the one-size-fits-all formulations, the marketing-driven development, the prioritization of packaging over performance. I can discuss that in general terms, I conceded. When would you like to conduct the interview? We scheduled for the following afternoon. After hanging up, I sat back, processing what had just happened. Biotech Quarterly was read by everyone in the industry, including my mother and the Meridian executive team. This would be their first formal introduction to Calibrate, an acknowledgement that what we were building warranted serious attention. I should have anticipated what came next. The morning of the interview, I received an email from Meridian's legal department, a former colleague I'd worked with for years. The subject line was clinical. Notice of potential non-compete violation. The message itself was equally sterile, citing clauses from my employment agreement and suggesting that Calibrate's business model might constitute direct competition with Meridian's planned personalized wellness initiatives. It requested a meeting to discuss concerns and reach an amicable resolution. I forwarded it to our lawyer with a terse note. Intimidation tactic. Please advise. Her response came within the hour. Standard cease and desist fishing expedition. They have no case unless they can prove they were actively developing personalized nutrition technology before you left, which, based on public records, they weren't. Recommend proceeding with biotech interview but avoiding direct comparisons to Meridian. Relief mingled with anger. This was my mother's doing, a thinly veiled attempt to rattle me before my first major industry interview. Perhaps she'd heard about our successful launch, or maybe news of the biotech piece had reached her. Either way, the timing was too perfect. To be coincidental, I considered canceling the interview to avoid escalation, but dismissed the thought almost immediately. Backing down now would set a dangerous precedent, suggesting Meridian could influence Calibrate's operations with legal threats. Besides, the publicity from Biotech Quarterly could accelerate our growth significantly. The interview went smoothly, with Vanessa asking thoughtful questions about our approach to personalization, the science behind our algorithm, and our vision for the future of nutrition. As advised, I kept references to Meridian General and Professional, focusing instead on industry-wide limitations that Calibrate was addressing. One last question, Vanessa said as we were wrapping up. Meridian recently announced they're developing their own personalized supplement line. Any thoughts on how your approaches might differ? I froze momentarily. This was news to me. I can't speak to Meridian's development plans, I said carefully. But Calibrate's approach is based on comprehensive health data analysis using our proprietary algorithm, developed over the past year. Our personalization goes beyond basic demographics or questionnaires to actual physiological markers. She nodded, making a final note. The article should run in next month's issue. We'll send a fact-checking email before publication. After she left, I immediately searched for information about Meridian's supposed personalized line. There was nothing in the recent press materials, no mention on their website. Either it was in very early development, or it was a fabrication, a strategic claim leaked to a journalist to undermine Calibrate's uniqueness, just as we were gaining attention. The latter seemed more likely, especially given the legal email. It was the kind of corporate maneuvering my mother excelled at, creating the perception of competition where none existed to stall a rival's momentum. The following weeks brought a steady increase in Calibrate's customer base. The personalized approach resonated particularly well with individuals managing specific health conditions, athletes optimizing performance, people with chronic inflammation seeking natural support, health-conscious professionals wanting evidence-based supplementation. Each customer received a comprehensive initial assessment kit, followed by personalized supplements delivered monthly, with quarterly reassessment to adjust formulations as their health evolved. The subscription model created predictable revenue, while the reassessment process strengthened customer relationships through ongoing personalization. But growth brought new challenges. Our small lab struggled to keep up with formulation demands. The hand-packed daily supplement packets took too long to assemble, creating fulfillment backlogs. Our customer service team, consisting initially of just Lucia and a part-time assistant, couldn't respond quickly enough to the increasing volume of questions. We needed to scale, but scaling required more capital. And raising more capital meant potential compromise. 3 venture capital firms approached us after the biotech piece appeared online. All 3 presentations followed a similar pattern: effusive praise for our concept, followed by suggestions that would fundamentally alter it. Streamline the assessment process, meaning reduce the science. Standardize the formulations into broader categories, meaning abandon true personalization. Accelerate market penetration, meaning prioritize growth over quality. Each time, I declined politely but firmly. Calibrate's value proposition was rooted in scientific integrity and genuine personalization. Compromising those principles might bring faster growth, but would ultimately undermine everything we stood for. Instead, we focused on incremental improvements to our existing model. We developed a semi-automated system for packaging supplements, reducing fulfillment time by 60%. We refined our assessment algorithm to require fewer biomarkers without sacrificing accuracy, making the testing process less expensive and more convenient for customers. 6 months after launch, we reached break-even, not thriving yet, but no longer at risk of imminent financial collapse. Our customer base had grown to just over 2,000 subscribers, with a remarkable 92% retention rate after the first quarterly reassessment. It was during this period of cautious stability that I received an unexpected invitation. The Western Health Innovation Conference, the industry's premier event, wanted me to speak on a panel about the future of personalized wellness. Other panelists included the CEO of a major health data platform, a renowned nutritional geneticist, and my mother. The email sat in my inbox for days while I considered my options. Declining would look defensive or unprofessional. Accepting meant a public confrontation with the woman who dismissed my leadership capabilities in front of our entire board. "You should do it," Dennis advised when I called him for guidance. "You've earned your place on that stage. Besides, nothing validates Calibrate more definitively than being recognized as a peer to established industry leaders." He was right, of course. This wasn't about my relationship with my mother. It was about Calibrate's position in the industry. I accepted the invitation. 2 weeks later, I received another email that changed everything. This one from Jonathan. "Chen, Meridian CFO and my former colleague. Audrey," it began without preamble. "We need to talk, not about legal threats or competition. Something's happening at Meridian that you should know about. Can we meet privately? No official capacity? Just as a concerned friend." I stared at the message, pulse quickening. Jonathan wasn't given to dramatics or corporate games. If he was reaching out this way, outside official channels, something significant was indeed happening at Meridian, something that concerned him enough to risk my mother's wrath by contacting me. I replied with a time and a location. A quiet bar in Ballard, far from both our offices, not knowing that this meeting would reveal the first cracks in Meridian's facade, cracks that would eventually bring my mother and brother to my doorstep seeking salvation. But that night, as I prepared for what promised to be an illuminating conversation, I felt no triumph at the prospect of Meridian's troubles, only a strange mixture of curiosity and apprehension about the company that had once been my entire world, and the family that had so eagerly shown me the door. The Ballard Brewhouse was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few locals nursing. Craft beers at the bar. I chose a booth in the far corner, positioned where I could see the entrance. Old habits from years of business negotiations. Never sit with your back to the door. Jonathan arrived precisely on time, looking significantly more worn than when I'd last seen him. The crisp suits and confident posture that had been his trademark at Meridian were replaced by rumpled business casual and tense shoulders. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the booth. He ordered a double scotch when the server approached, Another departure from the man who'd always limited himself to a single glass of wine at company functions. "Your email was intriguing," I replied after ordering a beer. "What's happening at Meridian that I should know about?" He glanced around before leaning forward. "It's not good, Audrey. The luxury beauty line that Parker pushed through? It's a disaster. Development costs ran 3 times over budget. The formulations aren't stable. We've had 2 recall scares already, narrowly avoided only because we haven't scaled distribution yet." I kept my expression neutral, despite the spike of vindication. "Manufacturing issues happen. It's more than that." Jonathan took a long swallow of his scotch when it arrived. "Parker's been making decisions impulsively. The celebrity endorsement deals are bleeding us dry. He fired most of the product development team you built and replaced them with his business school friends who have 0 experience in supplements." He hesitated. "The board is getting nervous. Your mother is trying to maintain control, but the numbers don't lie." "What numbers?" I asked, professional curiosity overriding my resolve to remain detached. "Q3 revenue is down 22% year-over-year. Cash reserves have been depleted by the beauty line launch. We're operating on borrowed money for the first time in company history." The seriousness of the situation settled over me. Meridian had always been conservatively managed, built on sustainable growth rather than flashy expansion. My mother's one consistent business principle had been avoiding debt. If they were financing operations through loans now, things were indeed dire. "Why are you telling me this, Jonathan? I'm not exactly in a position to help." He met my eyes directly. "Because it's your life's work too, Audrey. 10 years of your career built that company. And because—" He paused, looking genuinely pained. "I should have spoken up at that board meeting. We all should have. What they did to you was wrong. I hadn't expected that. Acknowledgement, much less something approaching an apology. It softened the defensive edge I'd maintained since sitting down. I appreciate that. But Meridian's struggles aren't my concern anymore. I have my own company to build. I know. I've been following Calibrate's progress. What you're building is impressive, genuinely innovative." He hesitated again. "There's something else you should know. Your mother has been having exploratory talks with Vitality Global about a potential acquisition." My beer froze halfway to my mouth. Vitality Global was the largest supplement conglomerate in North America, known for acquiring promising companies and stripping them down to their most profitable elements. "She's considering selling Meridian?" Jonathan nodded grimly. "The preliminary valuation is less than half what the company was worth a year ago. But if losses continue at the current rate, it might be the only option. I thought you should know before you see her at the conference next month." The information settled heavily in my chest. Despite everything, the thought of Meridian, the company my mother had built from nothing, the company I had helped shape for a decade, being dismantled by corporate raiders was unexpectedly painful. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I know this puts you in a difficult position." "I'm probably leaving soon anyway," he admitted. "Several of us are updating our resumes. The environment has become challenging." We finished our drinks in thoughtful silence, then parted with an awkward handshake that acknowledged our strange new dynamic, neither colleagues nor quite friends, but connected by shared history and concern. The drive home through Seattle's rainy streets gave me time to process. Meridian's struggles didn't change anything for Calibrate. My path forward remained clear. Yet knowing my former company was floundering brought conflicting emotions. Concern for the employees who might lose their jobs, a twinge of sadness for my mother's legacy, and yes, a shadowed satisfaction that Parker's leadership was proving to be exactly as disastrous as I'd predicted. The following morning, I channeled those conflicted feelings into renewed focus on Calibrate. We were approaching a critical juncture, successful enough to prove our concept, but still too small to achieve the economies of scale that would make our personalized approach truly profitable. We needed a breakthrough. It came from an unexpected direction, Dr. Elisa Kwan, our scientific advisor, burst into my office waving a medical journal. "Audrey, you need to see this." She slapped the journal down on my desk, already open to a flagged article. Harvard Medical School just published a 5-year study on nutrition personalization. Their conclusions validate our entire approach. I scanned the article, pulse quickening. The randomized controlled trial had followed over 500 participants, comparing standardized supplements to personalized regimens based on individual biomarkers, essentially what Calibrate was doing, though with less sophisticated algorithms. The results were unequivocal. Participants receiving truly personalized supplements showed significantly improved health outcomes across multiple measures. Inflammation markers reduced by 34%. Energy levels increased by 28%. Sleep quality improved by 41%. "This is exactly what we needed," I breathed, already thinking through the implications. Independent validation from one of the most respected medical institutions in the world. Elisa nodded enthusiastically. "There's more. The lead researcher, Dr. Miranda Kapoor, is an old colleague of mine. I reached out as soon as I saw the publication. She's interested in Calibrate's technology, specifically how our algorithm processes biomarker data to create personalized formulations. She's suggested a potential research partnership. A research partnership with Harvard Medical School would transform Calibrate overnight, from promising startup to scientifically validated health technology company. The credibility alone would be worth millions in marketing value. Set up a call, I decided immediately. This could change everything. The call with Dr. Kapoor exceeded even my optimistic expectations. After reviewing our methodology and preliminary client data, she proposed a 6-month pilot study using Calibrate's technology with a subset of her research participants. If the results were positive, it would lead to a larger formal study and potential co-authored publications. "Your approach is years ahead of what other companies are doing," she told me, her voice carrying the weight of academic authority. "Most so-called personalized supplements are based on questionnaires and broad demographic categories. You're the only company I've encountered that's actually using comprehensive biomarker data and algorithmic processing to create truly individualized formulations." The validation from a respected researcher was sweeter than any venture capital interest or revenue milestone. This was acknowledgement of what I'd always believed, that rigorous science, not marketing hype, was the future of wellness. We moved quickly to formalize the research partnership, allocating resources to support the pilot study despite our still precarious finances. If successful, the partnership would provide the scientific credibility we needed to scale exponentially. While the Harvard collaboration was developing, another opportunity emerged. A reporter from the New York Times Health section contacted us for a feature on the future of personalized health. The Harvard study had ignited mainstream interest in nutrition personalization, and Calibrate was positioned as the commercial leader in the space. The resulting article, titled "The End of One-Size-Fits-All Wellness," prominently featured Calibrate as the company bringing medical-grade personalization to consumer supplements. My portrait appeared alongside quotes about our data-driven approach and commitment to scientific validation. The day the article published online, our website traffic increased by 4,000%. New customer signups jumped from our average of 20 per day to over 300. Our small fulfillment team was immediately overwhelmed, working around the clock to process assessment kits and prepare personalized formulations. "We need to scale, now," Lucia announced during our emergency management meeting. "We've hit capacity on every front: lab processing, formulation production, customer service. We either grow or start turning people away." The rapid growth presented a classic startup dilemma. We needed significant capital to scale operations, but our sudden prominence made us vulnerable to competitors with deeper pockets who might rush to market with inferior versions of our concept. Dennis, who had become something of a mentor beyond his role as investor, advised caution. You've got the first mover advantage in a scientifically validated approach. Don't compromise quality for speed. Better to have a wait list than disappointed customers. He was right. But a wait list wouldn't satisfy investors who wanted to capture market share while interest was peaking. After days of deliberation, I developed a 3-phase scaling plan that prioritized maintaining our scientific integrity while strategically expanding capacity. First, we would automate our most time-consuming manual processes, particularly the personalized supplement packaging that was creating our worst bottleneck. Second, we would expand lab capacity through partnerships with certified facilities rather than trying to build out our own infrastructure overnight. Third, we would carefully grow our team, focusing on specialized roles that directly supported our scientific differentiation. The plan would require $3 million in new investment, significantly more than we'd raised to date. With Dennis's backing, I prepared a new funding round, this time approaching only investors who explicitly valued scientific rigor and sustainable growth over quick exits. The conversations were different this time. Instead of having to justify our emphasis on personalization, I was showing potential investors a validated approach with Harvard's stamp of approval and a New York Times feature. Instead of projections, I had actual customer data demonstrating extraordinary retention rates and measurable health improvements. We closed the funding round in 3 weeks, oversubscribed with investors competing to participate. The final raise came in at $4.2 million, giving us runway to execute our scaling plan with appropriate care rather than desperate haste. As Calibrate expanded, my thoughts occasionally turned to the upcoming Western Health Innovation Conference, where I would share a stage with my mother for the first time since leaving Meridian. The panel topic, personalization, marketing buzzword, or scientific revolution, seemed tailor-made for confrontation. The week before the conference, I received an unexpected email from Maya Reed, Parker's wife and Meridian's marketing director. We had never been close, her loyalty firmly aligned with my brother and mother. The message was brief. Audrey, are you available for coffee before the conference? There are some things you should know before the panel. It's important. My instinct was to decline. The last thing I needed was family drama distracting from Calibrate's momentum. But curiosity won out, and I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our offices. Maya arrived looking as polished as ever in designer business attire, but the confident smile she usually wore had been replaced by a tense expression. "Thank you for meeting me," she said after ordering her elaborate cappuccino. "I know we've never been particularly close." "What's this about, Maya?" I asked, skipping the small talk. "Your message implied some urgency." She glanced around before leaning forward. "It's about the panel, and about Meridian. Your mother is planning to announce a new personalized nutrition line called Meridian Bespoke during her presentation. She'll claim it's been in development for years." I raised an eyebrow. "That would be a demonstrable lie." "Yes." Maya fidgeted with her coffee cup. "The reality is they're rushing to cobble together something that looks competitive with Calibrate, but with none of the science behind it. They've hired a bioinformatics consultant to create a simplified algorithm that generates supplement recommendations based on a basic questionnaire. It's personalization theater, not actual personalization." The information didn't surprise me, but Maya's willingness to share it did. "Why are you telling me this?" She met my eyes directly for the first time. "Because it's wrong. Because what Parker and Vivian are doing to Meridian is destroying everything you built." She hesitated. "And because I'm pregnant. I don't want my child born into a family business built on lies and shortcuts." That was unexpected. "Congratulations on the pregnancy," I offered, unsure how to respond to her sudden attack of conscience. "Thanks." She smiled briefly before turning serious again. "Look, I'm not here to repair family bridges or ask forgiveness for how things went down, but professionally, the nutritional supplement industry needs integrity. What you're building at Calibrate is real. What Meridian is doing now, rushing inferior products, making false claims, taking on dangerous levels of debt, it's wrong. And it's going to implode spectacularly. Jonathan mentioned financial troubles. I acknowledged. Is it worse than... He knows? Maya nodded grimly. Much. The beauty line is hemorrhaging money. 3 major retail partners have reduced their Meridian orders due to quality concerns. And the Vitality acquisition talks? They've stalled because due diligence revealed too many problems. This was far more serious than I'd realized. Meridian wasn't just struggling, it was potentially on the verge of collapse. What does Parker say about all this? Maya's expression darkened. Parker's in denial. He's convinced one big celebrity deal or marketing push will turn everything around. Your mother enables him because admitting he's failing would mean admitting she made the wrong choice. She paused. They both underestimated how much of Meridian's success was because of you. The validation should have felt satisfying, but instead, it just felt sad. All that work, all that growth, potentially undone in less than 2 years by poor leadership and misplaced priorities. I appreciate the warning about the panel, I said. But Meridian's problems aren't mine to solve. I know, Maya agreed. I just thought you should be prepared for what your mother might say or claim, and... She hesitated. I thought you deserved to know that you were right. About all of it. We parted with an awkward handshake, our brief alliance already dissolving back into the complicated family dynamics that had defined our relationship. The conference arrived the following week, held at Seattle's prestigious convention center, with thousands of industry professionals in attendance. I arrived early for the panel, reviewing my talking points one last time before heading backstage. The moderator, Dr. Helen Liu from Stanford's Personalized Medicine Initiative, greeted me warmly. Dr. Reed, so pleased to have you. Your work at Calibrate is exactly the kind of evidence-based approach we want to highlight. I thanked her, then froze as a familiar voice carried from the green room entrance. My mother had arrived, immaculately, dressed in her signature power suit, her expression betraying no surprise at seeing me. Audrey, she said with a polite nod. You're looking well. Mother, I responded, equally formal. Congratulations on your new personalized line. Maya mentioned you'd be announcing it today. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed her features before her professional mask returned. Yes, Meridian Bespoke. We're quite excited about it. I'm sure the audience will have questions about your approach to personalization, I said mildly, particularly the scientific validation behind it. Before she could respond, we were called to the stage. The large auditorium was filled to capacity, a sea of industry professionals eager to hear about the next frontier in wellness. Dr. Liu introduced each panelist, saving my mother and me for last. And representing 2 fascinating approaches to personalized nutrition, we have Vivian Reed, CEO of Meridian Wellness, a pioneer in the supplement industry, and her daughter, Audrey Reed, founder of Calibrate Wellness, whose data-driven personalization technology is partnering with Harvard Medical School on groundbreaking research. The subtle positioning wasn't lost on anyone. Established industry versus innovative upstart. Traditional approaches versus cutting-edge science. Mother versus daughter. The discussion began with general questions about personalization trends, with each panelist offering their perspective. When my turn came, I emphasized Calibrate's commitment to measurable outcomes. True personalization isn't about marketing or customer experience. It's about measurable health improvements, I explained. Our approach is built on comprehensive biomarker analysis and continuously refined algorithms that adapt formulations as clients' health evolves. The preliminary results from our Harvard collaboration show improvements in key health markers that far exceed standard supplementation. My mother's response was predictably polished. At Meridian, we believe personalization must balance scientific rigor with accessibility. Our soon-to-launch Meridian Bespoke line will combine targeted assessments with our 30 years of formulation expertise to create an approachable, personalized experience. The contrast in our approaches couldn't have been clearer. Specific, data-driven claims versus vague marketing language. As the panel progressed, the moderator directed increasingly specific questions about methodology, validation, and results. While I could reference peer-reviewed research and actual client outcomes, my mother relied on generalities and promised future studies. Then came the question I'd been anticipating. Ms. Reed, Vivian, how long has Meridian been developing its personalized approach, and what prompted this direction? My mother smiled confidently. Personalization has always been part of Meridian's vision. We've been researching individualized nutrition for many years, quietly developing the technology that will power Meridian Bespoke. It was a blatant falsehood. During my entire tenure at Meridian, including my last year as COO, no such research had been conducted. No resources had been allocated to personalization technology. In fact, my mother had explicitly rejected my proposals in this direction, calling them unnecessarily complicated. I had a choice. Let the lie stand unchallenged or correct the record publicly. The professional move would be silence. The honest move would be confrontation. Before I could decide, Dr. Liu turned to me. Dr. Reed, Audrey, you spent many years at Meridian before founding Calibrate. Can you speak to how the personalization approaches of the two companies differ? All eyes shifted to me, including my mother's, her expression now a warning. The audience waited, sensing the tension beneath the professional veneer. In that moment, staring into the expectant faces of industry peers, I realized I had nothing to prove anymore. Calibrate's success spoke for itself. The Harvard partnership validated our approach. The growing customer base confirmed our market fit. I didn't need to publicly contradict my mother to win. I'd already won. Calibrate and Meridian serve different customer needs, I said carefully. Our approach at Calibrate is highly technical, using advanced biomarker analysis and proprietary algorithms to create truly individualized formulations. It's resource-intensive but produces measurable, significant health improvements. Meridian's approach appears to prioritize accessibility and ease of use, which serves a different but equally valid market segment. The industry needs both innovations. It was diplomatic, factual, and preserved my mother's dignity while subtly highlighting the fundamental differences in our approaches. Her slightly widened eyes told me she recognized the professional courtesy I'd extended, and perhaps hadn't expected. The rest of the panel proceeded without direct confrontation, though the contrast between our company's approaches remained evident to anyone paying attention. When the session ended, the audience response was telling. A line of scientists, physicians, and health technology professionals formed to speak with me, while my mother was surrounded by marketing executives and retail buyers. As I was gathering my notes, my mother approached, waiting until we had a moment of privacy. That was professional of you, she said, an acknowledgement that fell short of gratitude. The industry is watching, I replied simply. No need to air family laundry on stage. She nodded, then hesitated. I understand congratulations are in order. The Harvard partnership is significant. Thank you, I said, surprised by the genuine acknowledgement. She seemed about to say more when Parker appeared at her side, his expression tight as he noticed me. Mother, the Vitality executives are waiting, he interrupted, deliberately ignoring my presence. Of course. She turned to follow him, then paused. Good luck with Calibrate, Audrey. I watched them walk away, struck by the subtle shift in her demeanor. Less commanding than I remembered, slightly diminished by the weight of Meridian's struggles. For the first time, I wondered if she regretted her choice of successor. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. Calibrate had been named Most Innovative Health Technology by the conference committee, the highest honor for a company. our size. The accompanying press release cited our groundbreaking approach to personalization backed by rigorous science and validated by prestigious research partnerships. As I shared the news with my team, celebrating our recognition with champagne in our still modest offices, I realized we had crossed an invisible threshold. We were no longer just a promising startup with an interesting concept. We were a recognized leader in an emerging field, setting the standard that others, including Meridian, were now scrambling to follow. What I didn't yet know was that this public validation, combined with Meridian's deteriorating situation, would soon bring my mother and brother to my door, not as family, but as desperate business leaders seeking the expertise they had once dismissed. The reckoning was coming sooner than any of us expected. Seattle winters had always struck me as fitting for business, the persistent gray skies demanding focus, the rain washing away distractions. As January's downpour beat against calibrates, office windows, I reviewed our year-end numbers with a satisfaction I'd never felt at Meridian. 18 months after launch, we had reached 12,000 active subscribers, a 94% retention rate, and our first quarter of substantial profitability. The Harvard Medical School study had published preliminary findings in the Journal of Nutritional Science, demonstrating that Calibrate's personalized formulations improved key health markers, 43% more effectively than standard supplements. 3 major health insurers had initiated discussions about potential coverage for our products as preventative care. We had moved into a larger facility in South Lake Union, where our expanded lab could process thousands of biomarker tests weekly, and our automated production line assembled personalized supplement packets with precision and efficiency. Most importantly, we had maintained our scientific integrity through every phase of growth. Not once had we compromised our commitment to true personalization based on comprehensive health data. "We've come a long way from that tiny office in Pioneer Square," Lucia remarked, setting down fresh coffee as she joined me for our weekly operations review. I smiled, remembering our humble beginnings. "Remember when we had to package supplements by hand? And Raj slept under his desk during launch week?" She laughed, then gestured to the financial summary on my screen. "These numbers would have seemed impossible then." "Not impossible," I corrected. "Just distant." Our conversation was interrupted by my assistant, Nora, appearing at the door with an unusual expression, somewhere between confusion and concern. "Audrey, there are visitors in reception asking to see you. They don't have an appointment." "Who are they?" She hesitated. "Your mother and brother." The room went silent. My mother and Parker had made no attempt to contact me since the industry conference 4 months ago. Their sudden appearance unannounced could only mean one thing. "How do they look?" I asked, a question that would have seemed odd in any other context. Nora understood immediately. "Tense. Your mother's doing that thing where she's trying to look completely composed but isn't. Your brother looks like he hasn't slept in days." I exchanged glances with Lucia, who raised her eyebrows in silent question. I nodded slightly. She could stay for this conversation. Having a witness might be prudent. "Show them in, please," I said, straightening the papers on my desk with deliberate calm. When they entered, the change in them was striking. My mother, always impeccably styled, looked significantly more worn than she had at the conference. Her designer suit still projected authority, but the subtle signs of strain, tightness around her eyes, a certain rigidity in her posture, were evident to anyone who knew her well. Parker looked worse. The casual confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by a haggard weariness that aging him a decade. His usual artfully disheveled appearance now just looked disheveled. "Audrey," my mother began, her voice maintaining its practiced smoothness despite everything. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment." "I assume you wouldn't be here if it wasn't important," I replied, gesturing for them to sit in the chairs facing my desk. "This is Lucia Ortiz, my Chief Operations Officer. She'll be joining us." Parker shifted uncomfortably at this, but my mother merely nodded, accepting the terms. They settled into the chairs, the sleek modern furniture of my office a stark contrast to Meridian's traditional mahogany aesthetic. "Impressive operation you've built," my mother commented, glancing around at the visible portion of our headquarters through my glass-walled office. "The growth has been remarkable." "Thank you," I said simply. "But I suspect you're not here to compliment Calibrate." She drew a measured breath, hands folded tightly in her lap. "No. We're here because Meridian is in trouble. Serious trouble." Despite Jonathan and Maya's warnings, hearing my mother actually admit this was jarring. In 15 years, I had never heard her acknowledge a business crisis she couldn't handle. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. Parker spoke for the first time, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Financial, operational, everything. The beauty line tanked. 3 major retailers dropped our core product line. Due to delivery issues, we've lost most of the senior team you built." "The Vitality acquisition fell through," my mother added. "They withdrew their offer after the second round of due diligence revealed the extent of the—" She paused, seemingly struggling with the admission, the mismanagement. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Parker flinched visibly. "I see," I said, careful to keep judgment from my tone. "That's unfortunate. But I'm not clear on why you're here." My mother straightened, summoning her remaining dignity. "We need your help, Audrey. Your expertise, your understanding of Meridian's operations." I waited, sensing there was more. "The board has removed Parker as CEO," she continued, the words clearly painful for her. "They've asked me to resume the position temporarily while we search for a permanent replacement. But the situation requires immediate intervention from someone who truly understands our business model, our supply chain, our product development cycle." "Someone like you," Parker muttered, not meeting my eyes. The irony was almost too perfect. The brother who had been handed leadership because of his charisma now acknowledging he needed my operational expertise. The mother who had deemed me not ready, now admitting I was perhaps the only person who could save the company. "What exactly are you asking for?" I inquired, my voice neutral. "Consulting," my mother specified. 3 months, perhaps 6. Enough time to stabilize operations, rebuild key relationships, and develop a sustainable recovery plan. "And what would Meridian offer in exchange for these services?" Lucia asked, her question professionally framed but with an underlying edge that communicated solidarity. My mother blinked, seemingly surprised that compensation would be discussed so directly. "Fair market rate for executive consulting, of course, plus expenses." I shook my head slightly. "Meridian can't afford market rate for the level of intervention you're describing, not in its current financial state." Parker's jaw tightened. "Then, name your price." "It's not about price," I said calmly. "It's about value exchange. Calibrate is my priority now. Taking time away from its growth to rescue Meridian would require substantial compensation. Not just financially, but strategically." "What are you suggesting?" my mother asked cautiously. I leaned forward, hands folded on my desk. "I need to understand Meridian's current situation in detail before I can determine if help is even possible. Financial statements, inventory reports, organizational structure, outstanding contracts, everything." "We can provide that," she said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Once I review those materials, if I believe Meridian can be salvaged, we can discuss terms." I paused, ensuring my next words landed with appropriate weight. "But I should be clear. Any arrangement would be between Calibrate and Meridian as corporate entities, not between us as family members." The distinction was important. This wouldn't be a daughter helping her mother. It would be a successful CEO potentially acquiring a failing competitor. "You're suggesting a merger?" My mother's voice sharpened. "I'm not suggesting anything yet," I corrected. "I'm establishing professional boundaries. If we proceed, it will be with formal agreements, board approvals, and clearly defined deliverables. Parker leaned forward, desperation breaking through his defeated demeanor. Audrey, this is still a family business, our family's legacy. Is it? I asked quietly. You both made it very clear that my connection to Meridian was purely professional when you decided I wasn't leadership material. I'm simply respecting the distinction you established. My mother's expression shifted, a rare glimpse of genuine regret crossing her features before her business mask returned. We made a mistake, she admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. The board recognizes that now. I recognize that now. The acknowledgement should have felt vindicating. Instead, it felt hollow. Too little, too late. Offered only when they needed something from me. Send the financial materials to Calibrate's general counsel, I said, bringing the meeting back to concrete next steps. I'll review them and let you know if I believe intervention is viable. They left with strained thanks, the weight of Meridian's uncertain future visible in their departures. My mother's usually confident stride now measured. Parker's shoulders hunched against an invisible burden. When the door closed behind them, Lucia let out a low whistle. That was intense. Are you actually considering helping them? I stared at the door, emotions I'd thought long resolved stirring uncomfortably. I don't know yet. It depends on how bad the situation truly is. And if it's salvageable, what would your terms be? A good question. What did I want from Meridian, the company that had shaped my career before discarding me? What would constitute fair compensation for diverting my attention from Calibrate to rescue my mother's legacy? I'm not sure, I admitted. But whatever happens, it needs to benefit Calibrate, not just satisfy my ego. The financial documents arrived the following morning, comprehensive, detailed, and far worse than I'd anticipated. Meridian wasn't just struggling, it was weeks away from potential bankruptcy. The luxury beauty line had been a catastrophic miscalculation, draining capital while generating minimal returns. Supply chain disruptions had alienated key retail partners. Most alarming was the debt, nearly $8 million in high-interest loans taken to finance Parker's aggressive expansion plans. I spent 3 days analyzing the numbers, consulting with Calibrate's financial team, and developing potential recovery scenarios. By the third evening, working late in my office, I reached my conclusion. Meridian could be saved, but not in its current form. I called a meeting with my executive team the next morning, presenting my findings and a proposed strategy. Meridian has 3 remaining assets of value, I explained, indicating sections of my analysis on the conference room screen. First, their manufacturing facility, which is specialized for supplement production and could increase our capacity immediately. Second, their established retail distribution channels, which would accelerate Calibrate's entry into physical retail alongside our direct-to-consumer model. Third, their legacy customer base, which remains loyal to their core product lines despite recent quality issues. What about their debt? Dennis asked from his position at the table. As our primary investor, his perspective was essential. Substantial but manageable if operations are immediately restructured, I answered. Their current burn rate would exhaust remaining cash within 6 weeks. With targeted intervention, we could extend that runway to 6 months. Enough time for a proper integration. Integration? Raj raised an eyebrow. You're thinking acquisition, not consulting. I'm thinking rescue and rehabilitation, I clarified. Meridian as a standalone entity isn't viable, but absorbed into Calibrate as a subsidiary? The synergies could benefit both companies. And your mother? Elisa asked the question everyone was thinking. Would she remain involved? A fair question with complicated implications. That would be negotiable. Her industry relationships remain valuable, but operational control would need to shift entirely to Calibrate's management structure. The team discussed various aspects of the potential acquisition, financial projections, integration challenges, talent retention strategies. By meeting's end, we had consensus. Calibrate would offer to acquire Meridian Wellness for a combination of cash and equity, structured to manage their debt while preserving their brand identity as a subsidiary. I called my mother that afternoon. "I've reviewed the financials," I said without preamble when she answered. "We need to meet. Your entire board, Calibrate's executive team, tomorrow morning." "That's very soon," she hedged, likely sensing the seriousness of my tone. "Meridian doesn't have the luxury of time. Based on your cash position, payroll will be challenging next month." A sharp intake of breath confirmed she hadn't realized their position was quite that precarious. "I'll arrange it," she agreed. The meeting convened in Meridian's conference room, the same room where, less than 2 years ago, I'd been informed my brother would be taking the position I'd earned. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, least of all my mother, who sat stiffly at the head of the table as both boards assembled. I presented our analysis methodically, outlining Meridian's current position without accusation or judgment, just facts, figures, and projections. When I finished the situation assessment, the room was silent, Meridian's board members looking shell-shocked despite presumably having reviewed the same information. "Now for our proposal," I continued, nodding to Dennis, who distributed bound documents to everyone present. Calibrate Wellness offers to acquire Meridian Wellness as a wholly owned subsidiary, assuming all debt and contractual obligations, in exchange for the consideration outlined in Section 3. As they turned to the relevant pages, I summarized the key points. The offer values Meridian at $12 million, significantly above its current market valuation given its financial distress. Payment would be structured as $5 million in cash, $3 million in Calibrate equity, and $4 million in performance-based earnouts tied to successful integration milestones. One of Meridian's board members, a venture capitalist who had backed my mother's initial launch decades ago, looked up sharply. "This valuation is well below what Meridian was worth 2 years ago." "Meridian was solvent 2 years ago," Dennis responded evenly. "Its current value reflects its current reality, not its past performance." Another board member cleared his throat. "And management structure? Would current leadership remain?" All eyes shifted between my mother and me, the question's real focus evident. "The proposal includes a transition plan," I explained. "Vivian would remain as a strategic advisor for 6 months, focusing on key client relationships and brand continuity. Parker would exit with a standard severance package. Day-to-day operations would immediately integrate into Calibrate's management structure, with retention bonuses for key Meridian staff who remain through the transition." My mother's expression remained carefully neutral, though her knuckles whitened around her pen. Parker, seated beside her, stared at the table. "We're offering to preserve Meridian's brand identity and core product lines," I continued. "This isn't a liquidation or dismantling. It's a strategic integration that honors Meridian's legacy while providing the operational discipline and innovation needed for its survival." The discussion that followed was extensive, with both boards asking detailed questions about integration, plans, financial projections, and staff retention strategies. Throughout, my mother remained uncharacteristically quiet, speaking only to clarify factual points about Meridian's current operations. As the meeting concluded, Meridian's board requested time for private deliberation. We agreed to reconvene the following day for their response. In the hallway outside, as both teams dispersed, my mother gestured for me to join her in her office. Unlike the conference room, this space had changed significantly. Family photos, once displayed prominently, were now absent, replaced by industry awards and product displays. It felt impersonal, scrubbed of history. "This isn't consulting," she said once the door closed behind us. "This is a takeover." "This is reality," I corrected. "Meridian cannot survive independently given its current financial position. The choice isn't between consulting and acquisition. It's between acquisition and bankruptcy. She moved to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. I built this company from nothing. 30 years of my life. I know, I said, softening slightly. That's why our offer preserves the brand and core products. A different acquirer might simply liquidate the assets and discard the Meridian name. Entirely. She turned back to me, her expression difficult to read. You planned this, didn't you? Even before we came to you for help, you were waiting for Meridian to falter. The accusation stung, not least because it was entirely untrue. No, I said firmly. I built Calibrate because I believed in personalized nutrition based on scientific validation, not because I wanted revenge or harbored some plan to acquire Meridian. If Parker had been a capable CEO, we might have become friendly competitors, or even partners eventually. But he wasn't, she acknowledged quietly, the admission clearly painful. No, he wasn't. And that's not entirely his fault. He was set up to fail by being placed in a role he wasn't qualified for. The implication hung between us, that she had made that decision, that her favoritism had contributed directly to this outcome. The board will accept your offer, she said after a long moment. They don't have a choice, but I want to negotiate my role in the transition. What did you have in mind? 3 months as advisor, not 6. A clean break is better for everyone. She straightened, summoning her remaining dignity. And I want your commitment that you'll maintain the Meridian Foundation's charitable initiatives. They're the one aspect of our work I'm genuinely proud of, regardless of how things have turned out. It was a reasonable request, and one that revealed a depth of character I hadn't expected. Agreed on both counts, I said. The Foundation's work is valuable and aligned with Calibrate's mission of improved health outcomes. She nodded, then hesitated before asking, and Parker? Standard severance as proposed. 3 months salary, continuation of benefits. It's generous given the circumstances. She accepted this with a small nod. He's not taking this well. His identity was wrapped up in being Meridian's CEO. I understand identity crises, I replied, unable to keep a hint of irony from my voice. They can be growth opportunities. A ghost of a smile crossed her features. Perhaps the first genuine one we'd shared in years. I deserved that. She paused, then added quietly, For what it's worth, I was wrong. About you. About Parker. About what Meridian needed. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother it was unprecedented. Thank you for saying that. Will you keep the Meridian name for the subsidiary? Yes, I confirmed. Calibrate Wellness will be the parent company, with Meridian as a division focused on retail distribution of science-backed supplements. Different market segments, complementary approaches. She nodded, a certain tension leaving her shoulders. You've built something remarkable with Calibrate. The personalization technology, the Harvard validation, the growth without compromising quality. It's impressive. More than impressive. Coming from her, this was extraordinary praise. Thank you, I said simply. I should have seen it earlier, your potential. I was too focused on what you weren't, charismatic, naturally commanding, to appreciate what you were. Methodical, visionary, uncompromising about quality. She shook her head slightly. Classic founder's bias, seeing leadership only in my own image. The acknowledgement was surprisingly healing, not because I still needed her approval, but because it represented growth on her part, an expansion of perspective that had come too late for Meridian, but perhaps not too late for our relationship. We all have blind spots, I offered, extending an unexpected olive branch. I probably could have communicated my ideas more effectively when I was at Meridian. She smiled wryly. Generous of you, but no, I wasn't listening. That's on me. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past and the uncertain future settling between us. Not comfortably, but perhaps with less hostility than before. The acquisition will be announced next week, I said, returning to practical matters. We should coordinate communication strategies for employees, customers, the industry press. Of course. She straightened, professionalism reasserting itself. I'll have the communications team prepare drafts for your review. As I turned to leave, she spoke again. Audrey? I paused at the door. Build it better than I did. The acquisition proceeded swiftly after both boards approved the terms. The industry press covered it extensively, most noting the irony of the situation. The daughter who had been passed over for leadership returning to acquire the company that had dismissed her potential. But we carefully managed the narrative, emphasizing synergy and strategic growth rather than personal vindication. Integration presented numerous challenges, as such processes always do. Meridian's culture had grown toxic under Parker's leadership, with competing factions and broken trust throughout the organization. Many employees were initially suspicious of Calibrate's management team, fearing mass layoffs or complete restructuring. I addressed these concerns directly in my first all-hands meeting with the combined staff. Calibrate acquired Meridian because we value its core strengths: manufacturing capability, distribution channels, loyal customer base. We need the people who make those strengths possible. This isn't about eliminating jobs. It's about redirecting energy toward sustainable growth. Over the following months, we carefully merged operations, retaining nearly 80% of Meridian's staff, while revitalizing their product development pipeline with Calibrate's scientific approach. We maintained the Meridian brand for retail distribution while introducing science-backed personalization technology for their direct-to-consumer channels. My mother surprised everyone by embracing her advisory role with genuine commitment, helping smooth customer and vendor relationships through the transition before departing as planned after 3 months. Parker, in contrast, declined any involvement in the integration, accepting his severance package and moving to Southern California to pursue what he described vaguely as entrepreneurial opportunities. 6 months after the acquisition, the combined company reached $30 million in annual revenue, 3 times what either company had achieved independently. The Harvard Medical School partnership expanded to include studies of Meridian's reformulated product lines, providing scientific validation that transformed their market positioning. 1 year after the acquisition, I stood at a podium accepting the Entrepreneur of the Year award from the Seattle Business Journal. My acceptance speech acknowledged the journey that had brought me there. Success isn't linear, I told the audience of industry peers and business leaders. It's iterative, adaptive, sometimes circular. The setbacks and redirections that seem devastating in the moment often lead to innovations and opportunities we couldn't have imagined. From my position on stage, I could see Dennis in the front row, nodding appreciatively. Beside him sat my mother, not as a company representative, but as my invited guest. Our relationship remained complex, informed by history that couldn't be erased, but we had found a way forward based on mutual respect that had been absent before. The most valuable lesson I've learned is that leadership isn't about charisma or command, I continued. It's about vision, consistency, and the courage to maintain standards when easier paths present themselves. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to discover what you were meant to build. As applause filled the room, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here, from rejected COO to award-winning CEO, from desperate exit to triumphant return. The acquisition hadn't been about revenge or vindication, though many had framed it that way. It had been about building something enduring, something that honored the best aspects of both companies while discarding what hadn't worked. In the chaos. And that was the most satisfying victory. Not proving my mother and brother wrong, but proving myself right. Not taking over Meridian, but transforming it into something better than it had been before. Not rejecting my family's legacy, but redefining it on my own terms. As I left the stage, award in hand, I was already thinking about Calibrate's next phase of growth. Not because I had something to prove anymore, but because I had something valuable to build. And that, I had discovered, was the most powerful motivation of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.